is everybody? I didn't mean to close the door. Okay, where are we supposed to be? So this is 28th. Supposed to be doing muscle today and have an exam next week that includes the muscles chapters. But we didn't finish bones last week, did we? Did we finish getting through all the bones? So I don't know. We'll might have to either postpone the exam or have the exam but have it not count the muscles. I don't know. Well, let's see how far we get today. We'll revisit that question about the exam later today. So, talked about bone tissue and types of bones and just bones in general. Did we get through all this stuff? Talking about osteoporosis. Anybody remember?
Well, maybe we finished the skeletal system stuff, but maybe that's just my imagination.
Did we start? I'm sorry, I'm confused because I'm starting the skeletal system in my Anatomy 1 class also Monday. We did bones. And I can't remember if we, in here, did we actually go over the names of any of the bones? Did we start looking at the bones of the skull and the names of them? The sphenoid and frontal and parietal? Okay. Okay, so I guess we left off around here somewhere. Nutrition and hormones that affect bones. So calcium, of course. We get calcium from food we eat, but we need vitamin D because one of the functions of vitamin D is as a hormone that causes our calcium to be absorbed into our blood from the food that we're digesting. That's why we need not only calcium but also vitamin D to maintain the required amounts of calcium in our body. The other vitamins and minerals are necessary for a healthy skeletal system. Several hormones are involved in bone growth and bone healing and just maintaining bone density. Calcitriol is the hormone that's the activated form of vitamin D that I was talking about, absorption of calcium. Sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, are required for healthy bones, and for that reason, after menopause, when the ovaries stop producing estrogen, women after menopause are at risk of osteoporosis more than men because there really isn't a menopause in men. There can be a gradual decrease in testosterone, but it's not all at once like in women. Parathyroid hormone, calcitonin, these are also involved in regulating the amount of calcium in the body, and we'll talk about these hormones more when we do the hormone chapter.
Excuse me. I think we did this already, but I mean, we can do it again. But I think I got skipped to slide 44.
Okay.
And then on the very last thing I wrote was thoracic cage start. Is there a slide that says thoracic cage?
Yeah. So we.
Because I wrote down you gave
So,
us the bones that we should know. And
so I give you a handout with a list of bones, right? And which should be the same as what's on this list. But did we go over the names of these bones? Oh, okay.
because I wrote down all the things, like to know how many of each for the
Okay.
cervical and thoracic.
Oh.
Rhodosis, kyphosis.
Okay, so the vertebrae. So we talked about the hyoid bone and the
We went over each bone.
vertebrae. Okay, thanks. And the sacrum. So this is the in between the left and right hip bones. This triangle-shaped bone, the sacrum. Where are you? The sacrum. That the whole spinal column sits on top of that, and below that is this little coccyx, the tailbone. Okay, thoracic cage. So we left off somewhere around here. So the thoracic cage includes the vertebrae in back, and then the ribs, and tells us the sternum, the breastbone here, and so that all forms what's called the thoracic cage, and it kind of looks like a cage with bars, and that surrounds the the thorax, which means chest. So that it surrounds and protects the heart and lungs. Um, we have 12 pairs of ribs. Remember, there's the number of cervical, thoracic, and lumbar vertebrae are 7, 12, and 5, right? And each thoracic vertebra has a pair of ribs attached, so the number of ribs is the same as the number of thoracic. The number of pairs of ribs is the same as the number of thoracic vertebrae, 12. Yeah, I remember, we talked about the false ribs and floating ribs. So the first 7 are called true ribs, and they have the costal cartilage. The rib cartilage goes directly from from the bone of the rib over to the sternum. But then below that, there are 5 more false ribs that and the upper 3 have cartilage, but these cartilages are attached. Each one is attached to the cartilage above it instead of being directly attached to the sternum. And then the false ribs also include these bottom 2, which have no costal cartilage in front. They're only attached in back at the vertebrae. Okay, so the sternum here in front has 3 parts. The top part is called the manubrium, and that's where the clavicles, the collarbones, are attached. And then this long part, the main long part, is called the body of the sternum, and this down here, this little triangle-shaped tip is called the xiphoid or xiphoid process. The pectoral girdle is what the arms are attached to, and that includes the clavicle or collarbone and the scapula on either side, left and right. The scapula, the shoulder blade, has it has this called the glenoid process, or glenoid. It's the socket for the ball of the humerus to fit in. It's called the glenoid. Sorry. Yeah, glenoid cavity. It's just a little shallow cup-shaped surface that forms the ball and socket joint of the main shoulder joint here. And that's the most flexible joint in your body. It can move in so many directions and twist, and it also makes that joint very vulnerable to injury. The most common injury in people, the most common type of orthopedic injury in people over age 40 is shoulder. You've heard of rotator cuff? That's a rotator cuff is it's like 4 muscles that surround this joint and like attach the shoulder to the arm, and I think just about every man I know in his 50s or 60s either currently has or has had rotator cuff injuries. I've had it myself, and I got something in my left shoulder right now that I don't know what it is. The doctor I went to got it wrong. So the scapula also has these processes. Remember, a bony process is just part of the bone that's sticking out. So this one sticking out here, and you can probably feel that on yourself. You just follow your collarbone out, and then a little beyond that is this acromion process. So that's shown here. And so so we said the medial end of the collarbone attaches to the manubrium of the sternum, the breastbone, but the outer end of the clavicle attaches to that acromion process of the scapula. So we got a good picture of that somewhere. Yeah. So here's the acromion process that's sticking up. That's part of the shoulder blade. And then here's the clavicle, and there's a joint there where they attach. And so that's called the acromioclavicular joint or the AC joint. You may have heard of that. So there's actually two joints at the shoulder. There's the ball and socket joint here where the arm attaches to the scapula. But a little above that, there's the AC joint where the clavicle attaches. And so both of those joints can be injured if this ball comes out of the sockets. That's called a dislocated shoulder. So if this ball and socket joint comes apart, it usually dislocates forward. So this ball would be in front of the socket. Sometimes it dislocates behind it. But this AC joint here can also get torn apart. It happens, playing football sometimes, an impact, or it happened to me on riding a bicycle, went over the handlebars. You just, it's a reflex. You put your arms out in front of you, but then when your hands hit the ground, that the impact goes all the way up your arm, and it can rip that AC joint apart. The way the surgeon fixed it on me is he just eliminated that joint. I don't have an AC joint on the right side anymore. So the ligaments that hold it together here, it's ripped apart. So the way they do this, and they do this all the time, it's a real common, they just cut off the end of the collarbone. And there's these ligaments that hold the end of the collarbone down, but this AC joint helps to stabilize it, hold the collarbone in place. But when they cut off, they just eliminate that joint, and he drilled a hole through the clavicle here, and then he threaded some additional ligaments through that and attached them to the scapula, because he said otherwise the clavicle would flop around too much. But anyway, he did that and it fixed it perfectly. No pain or anything. It works fine. Looks weird on an X-ray though. The clavicle just ends. Like a half inch is missing off the end. Okay, so the clavicle is it's got a little bit of a double curve, or like an S curve. Okay, the humerus, the upper arm bone, that's this guy, this one. I should have more lights on. So the upper arm, we said, has a ball that fits into the socket, form that ball and socket joint, and the elbow at the distal end, or the distal end, forms a joint with the two forearm bones, the radius and ulna. The one on the thumb side is the radius. So you got the ulna and the radius is on the thumb side. of the forearm. And it's called a radius because the, the, uh, the radius bone twists. And so as it twists, if the radius bone twists over the ulna, the distal end of the radius sweeps out an arc, like along the radius of a circle. So it's called the radius bone. What allows it to twist like that is the proximal end of the radius has this rounded surface on it, and that's called a pivot joint. So it can slide, it can twist alongside of a little notch in the side of the ulna. There's pictures of that. Yeah, this. So this is this rounded surface on the radius that fits into a little rounded notch in the ulna, and it allows the radius bone to twist. And that's why you can twist your hand. What's actually twisting is your radius bone is twisting over your ulna. So there's actually two joints at your elbow. There's the hinge joint. The elbow joint is a hinge joint that you can flex or extend. The hinge joint is different from a ball and socket. A ball and socket can twist. It can move this way, back and forth, up and down. The hinge joint can only do this. Only move in one plane, just like the hinges on a door. A door can only do this. It can't do this. It can't twist. So that what the hinge joint does. But then there's also the pivot joint, right below that, between the radius and the ulna. So continuing down the arm, there's the wrist bones. And there's eight of these. They're called carpals. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One of them here is hidden. Here you can see all 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. For this class, you don't need to learn the names of you don't need to know learn those 8 names. You just need to know that the wrist bones are called the carpals, and there's 8 of them on each wrist. And the hand bones are called metacarpals. There's 5 of them, one for each. So these are the bases of the fingers, the bones in the hand, and then the finger bones themselves are called phalanges. Phalanx with an X is singular. But there's 3 of them, 3 phalanges per finger, except the thumb has only 2. So this one's a metacarpal. 1 phalanx, 2 phalanx. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 2 is 14 phalanges per hand. And so they're just called proximal, middle, and distal, and they're numbered 1 through 5. The thumb is number 1. The index finger is 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, the lower appendages, the legs, are attached to the pelvis. So the pelvic girdle includes the left and right hip bones, also called coxa. The hip bones are called coxa with a C. And then the sacrum in between them, and the coccyx, the tailbone. Each hip bone is actually made up of 3 bones that are fused together. So the ilium is the part that forms this crest, this ridge at the top. And they're shown in different colors here, but if you actually look at a hip bone, they're all fused into one bone. You can't tell where one ends and the other begins. So the pubis part is in the front here, and that's where the pubic symphysis is. That cartilage that holds the left and right hips together there, and then the ischium is the part you sit on back here. These are the ischium bones. So ilium, ischium, and pubis. Oh, the acetabulum is the socket for the ball and socket hip joint. So it's like the shoulder joint, ball and socket. So that's why your hip you can move, and you can move it this way and this way, and you can twist. But that's a very, very flexible joint at the hip. So there's the socket, the acetabulum. That's got cartilage in it. The male and female pelvis are shaped a little different, and this angle here is wider in females compared to males. The hips in general are wider in females compared to males, and medical examiners can and anthropologists, archaeologists can use that to determine if a skeleton is from a male or female. Okay, the femur, the thigh bone, largest bone in the body here. It has this rounded head that fits into the socket in the hip. Let's look at the picture of that. So this rounded head fits into the socket, and it's on a neck of the femur here, and that's where hips get fractured commonly, especially in older people with osteoporosis. But you can imagine if a person falls over lands on one side, this bump here, the trochanter, that's going to hit the floor first, and that impact can break it right along that narrow neck there. That's a serious injury in an older person because they end up many older people, they go down, their health goes downhill if they break a hip, because then they're laid up for a while in bed or a wheelchair, and that just leads to more osteoporosis, because if you don't have weight-bearing stress on your bones, they get weaker. The weight bearing stimulates the production of bone tissue. And their muscles get weaker, and sometimes they're just never the same. They never recover their mobility and independence after a broken hip. Okay, so at the distal end, there's two joints here. There's a joint between the femur and the tibia, the shin bone, but then there's also a joint between the patella, the kneecap, that slides up and down a little bit in a groove that's on the end of the femur. We have a cool model of that. This shoulder model. We have a shoulder model with a clavicle and a scapula, and it has the AC joint here. It's a rubber that represents the ligaments holding that together. There's the ball and socket joint. But here's the knee So the femur, and then the tibia, the shin bone, and there's another lower leg bone, this thinner one called the tibia on the lateral side. But this is the patella, and we have this big thigh muscles in front called the quadriceps, and that this tendon here is at the uh, um, the distal end of these big quadriceps muscles. So this tendon, when you got your knees bent, that supports your whole body weight. And that when that quadriceps muscle contracts to straighten the leg, um, the the patella slides up and down in a groove in the end of the femur. There's cartilage on the femur, there's cartilage on the back of the patella to make that movement nice and smooth. But there's a common condition called chondromalacia. What does chondra mean? Chondra means cartilage. If you see chondra in a word, it has something to do with cartilage. Chondromalacia. What does malicious mean? If somebody is malicious or does something that's malicious, it means bad. Malicious just means bad. So what does this mean? Bad cartilage, right? So this condition is called chondromalacia patella. If you ever work for an orthopedist, work in an orthopedist office or something, you'll see a lot of this because it just means that the cartilage on the back of the patella or the cartilage on the front of the femur here, the cartilage is bad. It's worn down, it's gotten rough, and so instead of nice and smooth, it grinds. And the doctor will tell the patient on a table like this, and the doctor will say, okay, straighten your leg. And the doctor will put his fingertips on there, and the patient will do this, and the doctor can feel, it feels like there's gravel under there. It'll be grinding. So they can go in, the doctor can go in and smooth out the cartilage with microsurgery, arthroscopic surgery. Okay, the lower legs. The big bone is the big shin bone is the tibia, and then the one lateral to that is the fibula. Then the ankle has 7 bones called tarsals. So this is looking down on the right foot. So there's 7 ankle bones here. They're called tarsals. And you don't need to know the names of them. You just need to know there's 7 tarsal bones. And that includes the big ankle bone here called the calcaneus. This big one. Then there are 5 metatarsals. So the hand bones are called the metacarpals. The foot bones are called the metatarsals. And then there are phalanges in the toes. Same number of phalanges in the toes as in the fingers. 4 on each toe, except the big toe has only 2 instead of 3. Did I say that right? 3 on each of the toes, except the big toe has only 2. So that's 4 times 3 is 12 plus 2 is 14. So each hand and each foot has 28, or has 14. So that's a total of 56 phalanges in a human body. Okay, any questions about the bone names and names of any of these bones? there's a skeleton in the, yeah, I was over there just last week, and right inside, go right inside the front door of the library, and immediately on the right, in a corner there, is there's a skeleton, and there's a hand skeleton and a foot skeleton, in addition to the full skeleton. It's just like this one. And the librarian there told me that if you want to use it, you just check it out. You can just tell the librarian you want to use it, and you just sign something, and then you can take it anywhere in the library and spend time with it wherever you want to in there. Can't take it home with you. After class on Friday, I'm always here until the campus closes at 2:30, and then they throw us out. So I leave the lab open that whole time. So if you ever want to stick around after class ends and spend time with anything in here, you can do that on Friday afternoons or Friday morning before class. This lab's open. There's no classes in here. This is the only class in here on Fridays. So if you wanted to come early, you could do that. So I guess we need to move on and look at chapter 4, and then after break we can have some lab time where you can spend time with the skeletons and bones, learning them. But chapters 10 and 11 are both about muscles, and I combined them into one PowerPoint, just like I did the 3 chapters on bones. So we need to look at this, see how muscles work. So muscle can do, that's not spelled right, is it? Include. Properties of muscle tissue. Contractility, it just means they can shorten themselves. It gets shorter and provide a pulling force. And need to understand, first of all, that muscles can only pull, they can't push. So this biceps muscle, it can get shorter and pull my elbow into a bent or flexed position. But if I want to straighten my elbow now or extend it, that biceps muscle cannot push it back straight. I have to have another muscle on the other side of my upper arm and elbow, that when my triceps muscles, when it contracts, that's what extends my elbow. So that's why our muscular system is made up largely of pairs of muscles. Like each joint has muscles to extend it, and then different muscles to flex it. And you're gonna have to learn the names of 17 muscles. I got a list on a handout here that we'll look at later. 17 might sound like a lot, but you probably know half of them already. Okay, excitability. Muscles are triggered or stimulated to contract by nerve impulses. A nerve impulse, as we'll learn when we do the nervous system, a nerve impulse is an electrical event that it's kind of like electricity flowing through a metal wire, but it's not exactly like that. It's a little more complicated. But that kind of electrical change of a neuron, a nerve cell, it causes a similar kind of electrical stimulation in the muscle cell, which causes it to contract. And we'll see in some detail how that works. Elasticity, muscles, after it contracts, it can easily stretch back um, when that joint is moves the other direction. And extensibility muscles are stretchy, so um, um, if I passively move my arm like this, then my muscles will just stretch accordingly, stretch and extend. Okay, function of the muscle tissue, producing movement, of course, stabilizing body position. So that just means that muscles not only move your body parts, but it also will hold them in place. Like right now, I'm standing here. Um, I'm not moving, but it's my muscles contracting that are keeping me in this upright posture. Um, regulate organ volume, so that means hollow organs like the stomach and intestines and the urinary bladder and the heart, they can contract or relax to change the size of them and to push liquids out of them or allow more to come in. And moving substances, blood through the blood vessels pumped by the heart, the food and the food that's mixed with digestive chemicals in our stomach and intestines, that's moved through by muscles contracting. And producing heat. Every time a muscle contracts, it generates some heat. That's why you get hot when you exercise or work hard physically. Every other day I go out and run for an hour, and in the winter time, it's always kind of challenging to know how to dress for it, because if it's like 35 degrees out, that's pretty cold. But if I dress as if I'm just going outside normally, then after I've been running for 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be too hot. And so you have to dress. If it's 35, I try to dress like I normally would dress if it's 45 degrees. So I'll be cold for the first few minutes, but then after my muscles are contracting for a while and from running and generating all that body heat, I'll be plenty warm after a while. Might even be too hot if I'm wearing too many layers. Okay, we've already learned that muscle cells are called fibers because they're long and slender. And we learned about the three types of muscle tissue: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Most of what we're talking about in this chapter is skeletal muscle, but cardiac and smooth muscle contract pretty much the same way, the same process. So here's comparing the characteristics of the three types of muscle. We already looked at that, I think. So skeletal muscle, long like spaghetti, more than one nucleus per cell, and skeletal muscle is the only kind of tissue in your body that is voluntarily controlled. That means you can consciously make a decision in your brain that you want your skeletal muscles to do something, and you can command them to do that. There's no other organ or tissue that you can do that. Cardiac muscle, they're branched. Each muscle fiber is branched like this. Involuntarily controlled, only one nucleus per cell, and they're connected end to end by these intercalated discs that intercalated discs that under a microscope you can see them as just little dark lines. And skeletal and cardiac are striated, so they have these lines these faint lines across the muscle fibers. And then smooth muscle, each fiber is long and pointed at the ends, just one nucleus, involuntarily controlled. Cardiac is only in the heart. Smooth muscle is in a lot of other internal organs, digestive organs, blood vessels can constrict and dilate because they have their own smooth muscle around them. Even those little tiny erector pili muscles that are attached to each hair, that's smooth muscle, involuntary control. Okay, here's what they look like under a microscope. Okay, skeletal muscle. Let's look at a diagram. So this would be an entire muscle here. So this would be like this biceps muscle in front of the upper arm, the one that makes the elbow bend when it contracts. And there'd be a tendon at either end. That biceps muscle has a tendon, actually two tendons. That's why it's called biceps. It has two tendons that attaches at the shoulder, and then it has a tendon that attaches down here at the forearm bone. But if we cut through that muscle, we'd see that it's made up of bundles, these bundles of muscle fibers, muscle cells. So this is the whole muscle. This is a bundle of a bundle called a fascicle that is made up of, each of these is a muscle cell or muscle fiber. So here's that fascicle enlarged. This is one muscle cell, muscle fiber. And inside of this muscle fiber, there are these long rods called myofibrils, and each of these myofibrils is capable of getting shorter, and that's what allows the whole muscle to contract and get shorter. And we'll have to look at what goes on inside of the myofibril. How can it shorten itself? We'll see that in a minute. But these words, epimysium, that's a layer of connective tissue that covers the whole muscle, and then this paramysium is a layer of connective tissue that covers the fascicle, and then the endomysium covers an individual muscle fiber. So those are just layers of connective tissue. Okay, this prefix myo means muscle. Sarco also means muscle. And so if you see myo or sarco in a word, it has something to do with muscle. The sarcolemma is just a name for the plasma membrane that surrounds the muscle fiber. So every cell, no matter what it is, every cell has a plasma membrane covering it. I don't know why they have to have a special name for the plasma membrane that covers a muscle fiber, but it's called a sarcolemma. The cytoplasm in a muscle fiber, that's just the inside part of the cell, is called sarcoplasm. And the endoplasmic reticulum, we learned cells have these organelles called endoplasmic reticulum. That's where new molecules are made. Proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates in a cell are made by the endoplasmic reticulum. But in a muscle cell, it has a special kind of endoplasmic reticulum that's called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And it's special because it in addition to making other molecules, it has a big hollow space in it for storing calcium ions. So the sarcoplasmic reticulum stores calcium ions, and we'll see that's very important because when the sarcoplasmic reticulum releases calcium ions into the cell, that's what causes the muscle to contract. And we'll see how that happens in a minute. This myoglobin, we've mentioned hemoglobin in here before. Hemoglobin is the protein that's in red blood cells that the oxygen attaches to. So when we inhale air into our lungs, that the oxygen goes into our blood, and in our blood we have red blood cells that have hemoglobin, and the oxygen hitchhikes on the hemoglobin while it's in the blood. Well, we have something similar in our muscle tissues called myoglobin that has oxygen attached to it. So because your muscles have to make so much energy all the time when they're being used, they need to generate so much ATP, and oxygen is required for making ATP. Your muscles have their own extra storage of oxygen in them, in addition to what your blood delivers to the muscles. Okay, well, here's just showing what that sarcoplasmic, well, the sarcolemma, the plasma membrane covering the muscle fiber, and then this is the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So this is all hollow, containing calcium ions in here. And here you see these tubes that are extensions of the sarcolemma that project down inside of the cell alongside of these sarcoplasmic reticulum, and this is called T-tubules. And we'll see why they're important in a minute. Okay, let's look at a diagram here. So just jump back here real quick. So again, this is one muscle cell, one muscle fiber, and inside of it there's a bunch of these long rods called myofibrils. And each section, you see that there's a line here, that this section here, and then there's another section here, another section. Each of those sections is called a sarcomere. So a myofibril is made up of just a bunch of sarcomeres connected end to end, and each of those sarcomeres can shorten itself. So what we're looking at here is a diagram of a sarcomere. So there would be another sarcomere here, and another one, and another one, all along that myofibril inside the muscle cell. So this dark thick line and these thinner lines those are muscle proteins. The thick ones are called myosin, and so these are called thick filaments, and the thin ones are called thin filaments. The thick filaments are made of myosin, and the thin ones are made of actin. And these little bumps sticking out in between them are these heads. They're called the heads of the myosin molecules that make up this thick filament. Here's it is enlarged, one of these heads. And at the tips of these heads, it says actin binding sites. So that's where the tips of the myosin can attach to these on the actin. The actin is made up of these protein molecules, like in a long chain. That's the dark spot is where the actin or the myosin can grab on and attach to that binding site on the actin temporarily, and so they form cross bridges between the thick filament and the thin filament. So each one of these things can reach down and grab onto the actin, and then this head of the sticking out of the thick filament, it can bend like this. These can bend back and forth. And so this cross bridge will reach down, grab onto the actin, and then bend, and it'll pull the actin in this direction. So a bunch of these cross bridges do that at once. They reach down, grab on the actin, and bend and pull the actin in this direction. So the whole thing gets shorter. That's how the muscles contract. The thick filaments grab onto the thin filaments and then pull them. And that's called the sliding filament theory of how muscles contract. But there are these other proteins on the thin filaments. So thin filament is made of this actin that's made up of these like beads on a necklace. But this long one is another kind of protein called tropomyosin. And there's another little protein molecule here called troponin that's attached to the tropomyosin. And you notice that this long tropomyosin is twisted around the actin, but it covers the binding sites. So when that tropomyosin is covering the binding sites, the cross bridges cannot attach to the thin filament. So in order for the thin filaments to attach, the tropomyosin has to move out of the way to uncover those binding sites on the actin. And so for that reason, the myosin and actin of the thick and thin filaments, those are called the contractile proteins, because those are the ones that slide past each other to contract the muscle, and the troponin and tropomyosin are called regulatory proteins because they're the ones that cover and uncover the binding sites and regulate when the thick filaments can or cannot attach to the thin filaments. Any of you guys know what heard of troponin in medicine? What would it mean if there was a patient who had troponin in his blood? Normally you don't have that in your blood, it's in your muscles, but what would it maybe mean if patient heart attack? Because what is a heart attack? It means that part of the heart muscle is dying because it's starved of oxygen and blood, and so cardiac muscle is breaking down, and now the troponin from that muscle gets into the blood. Normally there wouldn't be troponin in the blood. So if a patient presents in the ER with symptoms of a heart attack, one thing they'll check for is troponin in the blood. That would be another clue to diagnose a heart attack. It could also be troponin in the blood if there's some kind of trauma to skeletal muscles, a kind of injury that would damage muscles. That could result in troponin getting into the blood. Okay, so how do what would cause the tropomyosin to move out of the way of the binding sites? Okay, so the skeletal muscles are innervated, which means they have neurons leading to them from the brain. So where the neuron meets a muscle fiber is called a neuromuscular junction, and so that looks like like this. So this would be a muscle fiber, and this would be a neuron, and so these tips of where the neuron meets the surface of the muscle fiber, that's called a neuromuscular junction. So when a nerve impulse comes along this neuron from the brain, that you want to contract that muscle, the nerve impulse reaches this connection, this neuromuscular junction, and this is called a synapse, where a neuron meets a muscle fiber, or a neuron meets another neuron, or a neuron meets any organ that it's stimulating to do something. That connection is called a synapse. And there's a little gap here in between. So this would be the axon terminal, or the end of the neuron here. And this would be the sarcolemma, the surface of the muscle fiber. And when this nerve impulse comes along, it causes these little molecules called neurotransmitters to be released here, and they drift across this gap. The gap is called the synaptic cleft. And then when these neurotransmitter molecules come into contact with the surface of the muscle fiber, and these are just little protein channels that we've talked about before, that allow ions or something to come in or out of the cell. When these neurotransmitters contact these little channel proteins, it shows us here that allows sodium. It causes these doors or gates to open up on these channels, and it allows sodium to flow in, positive sodium ions. So that causes an electrical change in the surface of the muscle fiber. Of these positive sodium ions come flowing in, and then this electrical change then will spread out along the whole surface of the muscle fiber, stimulating that muscle fiber to contract. Then what happens? Remember we saw that the sarcolemma, the plasma membrane, has these tubes that extend down deep into the muscle fiber, called T-tubules. That's what this is. So that electrical change spreads out over the muscle fiber. It travels down these T-tubules to where they're next to the sarcoplasmic reticulum that contains all this calcium ions. That causes the calcium to come out of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So nerve impulse, it electrifies the surface of the muscle fiber. That electrical change travels down the T-tubule, causes the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium ions inside the cell. So all these calcium ions come flooding into the inside of the cell, where these thick and thin filaments are. When the calcium comes into contact with this troponin, which sits on top of the tropomyosin, these troponin molecules change shape. It pulls the tropomyosin, the long one, out of the way, uncovers the binding sites. That allows these cross bridges from the thick filaments to reach up and grab onto the binding site on the thin filaments. And then the binding, the cross bridge will bend, like that arrow shows. It'll bend this way, pulling the thin filament along with it. What provides the energy for this cross bridge to bend? It's ATP. So you see ATP. There has to be a molecule of ATP here and the energy from that ATP will cause that to bend. So it says ADP and a phosphate. So ATP has 3 phosphates. That's a charged battery. If you remove the third phosphate, it releases the energy, and that is used for this cross bridge to bend. And now it's ADP, just adenosine diphosphate. So now these two will be this dead battery and this phosphate. They'll be released. They'll go away, and then a new ATP molecule will come, and then the cross bridge will move back, grab on a little farther along along the thin filament, and bend again. And so all these cross bridges are doing that at the same time. They grab onto the actin, they pull, release, straighten out, grab it again, pull it again. And that's what causes the whole sarcomere to get shorter and produce a pulling force. So that's happening in each one of these little sarcomeres along this myofibril. Each one gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So the whole myofibril gets shorter. All these myofibrils are doing that at the same time. So the whole muscle fiber gets shorter and produces a pulling force. And that will continue to happen as long as the brain keeps sending nerve impulses to that muscle to contract. As soon as that muscle stops receiving nerve impulses, the calcium, or where am I?
This is a repeat.
Sorry, the calcium will get like sucked back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The tropomyosin will cover the binding sites again, and the muscle will relax, stop contracting. Something else we skipped about, motor units. A motor unit is just a motor neuron. A motor neuron is just we'll learn this when you do the nervous system chapter, but there are sensory neurons and motor neurons. A sensory neuron is just a neuron that takes information to the brain. A motor neuron is one that takes information from the brain out to some organ like a skeletal muscle. A motor unit is just one of those motor neurons from the brain to the muscle, along with all of the muscle fibers that are controlled by that one motor neuron. It's called a motor unit. So it could be as few as only 10 neurons, or 10 muscle fibers controlled by one neuron, or as many as a couple thousand. So if I wanted to pick up something that's not very heavy, I wouldn't need use all of the muscle fibers in that biceps muscle. So I would just use maybe a few motor units. But if I was picking up something that weighed 20 pounds, picking up with that one arm, I might use all of use all of the muscle fibers in that muscle. So I would use all of my motor units. And this word recruitment just means activating more motor units. So I would if I was picking up something light, I would recruit only a few motor units. But if I was picking up something heavy, I would recruit all of them for that muscle. Okay, this term excitation contraction coupling, that's just what we just described. The excitation of the muscle by the neuron, and then the contraction is what is the thick and thin filaments sliding past each other. And so this is all described here in words. This acetylcholine, that's just the name of the neurotransmitter at the neuromuscular junction. There's a lot of different kinds of.
This is a repeat of this explanation.
There's a lot of what is that? What's that? Oh. There are many different kinds of synapses in your nervous system, and different kinds of neurotransmitter molecules. But at the neuromuscular junction, the neurotransmitter is always acetylcholine. It's abbreviated ACH. But these are just the steps of this. So the nerve impulse comes, the electrical impulse spreads over the muscle. The sarcoplasmic reticulum releases calcium ions. Calcium causes troponin to change shape and pull the tropomyosin off of the binding sites. Then the cross bridges from the thick filament attach and use energy from ATP to pull the thin filaments along the thick filaments, and the whole thing gets shorter. So those cross bridges stay attached until a new ATP molecule comes along and to provide energy, and only then will it release and move farther along the thin filament and grab again. And this is why you heard of, you guys probably know what rigor mortis is. Rigor mortis, rigor means stiff, mortis means dead. So a dead body gets stiff after a few hours. And what causes that, so the joints stiffen up. Whatever position that body was in when it died, those joints won't bend, won't move from those positions. And it's not because the joints lock up or anything, it's the muscles. Because the muscles, your muscles, even when you're not contracting your muscles, all of your skeletal muscles they always have some cross bridges attached, even when they're relaxed. But and then there has to be ATP go to those cross bridges to cause them to release, and then the muscles start contracting. So if my arm right now, I'm not contracting any of these muscles, but I have cross bridges attached in my biceps and also in my triceps. And if I die in this position, those cross bridges are locked there. And because when you die, you're not, there will not be ATP going to those cross bridges anymore because you're dead. And those cross bridges will be just stuck there. So this muscle will not be able to relax. This one won't be able to relax, so my elbow can't straighten or bend. So it's just locked in that position. And rigor mortis doesn't last forever. After, depending on temperature and stuff, how long does it last? A day or so? And then the joints will go ahead and loosen up, and that's because those cross bridges, the proteins in the muscle just start decaying, breaking down, decomposing, and the cross bridges release, and now everything loosens up. Okay. Okay, this is a lot of repeat, a lot of diagrams and steps, just showing the same process in different ways. So I hope that's not confusing, that it's just a lot of repeat here. Again, this is showing the thick filaments with the cross bridges and then the thin filaments. And so this would be a muscle that's extended, it's long, but then when it gets shorter, it contracts. You see the thin filaments are pulled toward each other. And at some point they will start running into each other, and then the muscle can't get much shorter after that. And when the muscle is, if the muscle is fully extended, like my arm is fully extended, there won't be very much overlap between the thick and thin filaments, and there won't be very many cross bridges that overlap the thick and thin. There won't be very many cross bridges that could attach. And so when your muscle is straight like this and you go to bend it, you can't make as much force because you just don't have as many cross bridges overlapping. But when you get it to about midway, that's where you have a lot of cross bridges overlapping the thin filaments, and you can produce a lot of force. But then when you get it almost completely bent, now the thin filaments start running into each other. You can't can't produce as much force. So you produce the most force when your muscle is your joint is about halfway bent. Okay, just more diagrams showing the same thing. Okay, isotonic and isometric contraction. You need to know the difference. And it just means isotonic means there's movement when a muscle contracts. Isometric means there's no movement when a muscle contracts. So for example, if I push this thing with and I'm using my arm muscles to push this. I push it, my arms get straighter, then so my muscles are contracting, getting shorter as I move this. That would be isotonic contraction. But something like this, it's not going to move. I'm pushing. My muscles are still contracting, but there's nothing moving. That would be isometric contraction. So if I lift something heavy, pretend this is heavy, and I'm holding it in this position. I'm using muscles. Otherwise, my arm was straightened. So I got my biceps muscle. I can feel that it's contracting, but it's not moving. That muscle's not getting shorter or longer. So that's an isometric contraction. Contracting a muscle to produce force, but nothing's moving. If I do this though, now it's isotonic. The muscle's contracting, but it's getting shorter as I move, as it produces movement. Now, isotonic contraction, with movement, it can be concentric or eccentric, or sometimes we pronounce that eccentric. Um, Concentric means the muscle, like this biceps muscle, is getting shorter as it contracts, lifting this object. But if I lower the object, if I slowly lower it, this muscle is still contracting, supporting it, but the muscle is getting longer. That's an eccentric isotonic contraction. So this would be a concentric isotonic contraction, shortening the muscle. This would be eccentric isotonic contraction. The muscle's getting longer. Both of those kinds of, if you're training your muscles, exercising, and you want to make your muscles stronger, it's important that you do both concentric and eccentric contractions. So if I'm lifting a dumbbell to strengthen my biceps, it's important that I focus on the concentric contraction, but also it's good to slowly, when I lower the weight, slowly lower it so that I'm keeping that muscle contracting even as I'm lowering the weight. That's also in your legs. If you're training to climb a mountain or something, what some people forget, they'll climb stairs, or they'll focus on climbing uphill with a backpack on or something when they're training to climb a mountain. But they forget you have to train for going down the mountain too. Where you step down and then you lower your body weight onto that muscle as it's bending, and those quadriceps muscle is getting longer with eccentric loading. And so if you don't train for that, then you'll be okay climbing up the mountain, but then coming down, that's what causes your quads and your knees to hurt, because you didn't train for the eccentric part. Okay, so here's showing again the concentric isotonic, eccentric isotonic, and isometric contractions. Okay, let's take a break. Too much stuff in this chapter. Who's not here? Gertrude's here. Mallory's here, right? Abby, and Rylan, and Catherine, Michaela. Yeah, Rylan and Michaela. Catherine's not here, I guess. Rylan, Michaela. Oh yeah. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. What should we do? I go through some of this real fast. So go through a little more of this stuff real fast, and then we'll do. Then we'll just spend the rest of the time looking at bones, I guess. So I gave a handout. That's muscle stuff. A worksheet to help help understand how muscles contract, and also there's a list of muscle names that you need to learn, and there's some unlabeled muscle diagrams on there that you can practice labeling them to learn the location of those muscles. We got models of arm and leg muscles back there, and we got 2 muscle man models back there for learning muscles. So aerobic cellular respiration. This is a process in almost all the cells of your body, breaking down nutrient molecules like sugars or amino acids from proteins we eat or fats, breaking them down to get the energy out of them, and that energy is used to recharge ATP molecules. That's going on in almost all the cells of your body all the time, and including your muscle cells. But muscles use so much energy. It takes a lot of energy to do this, a lot of ATP. And so your muscles, in addition to um, aerobic cellular respiration, um, which requires oxygen. That's why you breathe fast, breathe heavy when you're using your muscles a lot. Your muscles have some other tricks for making ATP. One of them is this stuff called creatine phosphate that's stored in your muscle tissues, and it has phosphate in it, just like ATP has phosphate, adenosine triphosphate. So your muscles can take the phosphate off of this molecule and put it right on the ADP to recharge it and make it into ATP. So it can do that in addition to making ATP in a regular way. And there's also an anaerobic type of cellular respiration that your muscles can do. So that means without oxygen. A or N prefix means without or not. This requires oxygen. This doesn't. And this is called glycolysis. It's actually a type of fermentation. The very same kind of process that some bacteria do, like from the kind of fermentation that is used for making sauerkraut and soy sauce. And what gives sauerkraut that sour flavor is lactic acid. So it's called lactic acid fermentation. Same thing in soy sauce and some other foods that are fermented. So what's good about this is that if you're working your muscles so hard that they use up all the oxygen, your blood just can't deliver oxygen fast enough. You're using your muscles so hard. Your muscles can then switch to this anaerobic type of cellular respiration to make ATP without oxygen. But the problem with that, two problems with it. By aerobic cellular respiration, the regular way, you make pretty much ATP, like from one glucose molecule, one little sugar molecule. The energy released is enough to recharge about 36 ATPs, 36 of those little batteries. But this anaerobic way, it recharges only two. You get only 2 ATPs from a glucose molecule. So it's better than nothing to keep your muscles going a little bit longer after they run out of oxygen, but it only helps for a minute or two. And the other problem with this is it makes lactic acid as a byproduct. You ever feel your muscles burning when you work them really, really hard? You're almost exhausted. That burning is from the lactic acid. That means that you've used up all the oxygen in your muscles. They've switched to this anaerobic type of cellular respiration to keep making a little more ATP, but now they've made lactic acid as a byproduct, and that lactic acid accumulates in your muscles and causes them to burn. And at that point, you're just done. Your muscles are completely crapped out, and you just have to rest and let your muscles recover. Let the blood deliver oxygen, make some ATP. The blood will take the lactic acid away. Your liver will process the lactic acid, and that's called oxygen debt. When you've used up all the oxygen in your muscles, you have to rest while that debt is repaid, while the oxygen is returned to your muscles. Okay, so what we talked about. We mentioned myoglobin, that protein that's in your muscles that stores a little extra oxygen. That's another thing that your muscles can do to help make ATP. So this word muscle fatigue, that just means your muscles are just done. They're just tired. can't use them anymore. And that could be they run out of ATP, accumulate lactic acid, or in some people, if you have a calcium deficiency, we've seen how calcium is necessary for the muscle contraction to work, because that's what causes the binding sites to uncover. So if you don't have enough calcium in your body, then your muscles won't contract right. That can cause muscle cramps. One of the reasons that people get muscle cramps if they don't have enough calcium. When I was a little kid, we had a dog who had puppies, and she was a little dog, and because the puppies were nursing, taking her milk, and she ran out of calcium. And one morning, she woke up and she couldn't. Her muscles were so just stiff, she couldn't contract her muscles because she was out of calcium. Had to take her to a vet, and they gave her calcium injection or something, and she was fine after that. We just had to make sure she got enough calcium while she was nursing. Okay, so making ATP. Okay, a twitch contraction. So that when one nerve impulse goes from your brain to a muscle, that'll cause that muscle to contract and then immediately relax. So you can't just say to your muscle and just send one nerve impulse and say contract and stay contracted, keep contracting. You have to keep sending nerve impulse, as long as you want that muscle to keep contracting, because as soon as you stop, your brain stops sending nerve impulses, that muscle will relax. So this is called a twitch contraction, just one nerve impulse. So this is tension, or the pulling force as the muscle contracts, and this is time. So one nerve impulse will cause the muscle to contract and then immediately relax. But if there's more nerve impulses coming after the first one, the muscle will start to contract, and then it'll contract and it'll start to relax, but then another nerve impulse will come. It'll contract a little more, and then if there's a third nerve impulse, it'll contract a little more. So each time it adds a little more tension, a little more force, pulling force, and that's called summation. Summation, just like in arithmetic, it just means adding stuff together. So the force from each nerve impulse is added to the last one, and so the muscle just contracts with more and more force until no more nerve impulse, and then it relaxes. If these nerve impulses come so fast, one immediately after the other, and the muscle doesn't relax in between nerve impulses, then it just contracts with just a consistent increase in force until it's fully contracted as much as it can, and then it'll just stay contracted as long as those nerve impulses keep coming real quickly, one right after another. So this is called tetanus or tetanic contraction, when it's just a straight increase to maximum force, and then it just stays at that force. This word tetanus also means a disease of lockjaw that's caused by a bacterial infection. That's a completely different thing. This kind of tetanus has nothing to do with that tetanus disease. It's just the same word. Okay, this muscle tone. Remember I said that you always have some cross bridges attached. That's called muscle tone. Even when you're sleeping, you have some cross bridges attached in your skeletal muscles. Okay, depending on what kind of activities you do a lot, like if you walk every day, you're the kind of person for exercise, you walk 3 miles every day. your muscles will get used to that. Your muscles will adapt to that, and yet, same thing with running. I run a lot, and so running is like the kind of running I do is like walking. I don't run really fast for a short period of time. That's called sprinting. I run at a slow, casual pace for an hour and or something, or 2 hours sometimes. And so that kind of low exertion muscles is you're like you're using your muscles, and then you're constantly using ATP, but you're using the ATP slow enough that your blood, your circulatory system is able to deliver enough oxygen. Your muscles can keep making the ATP, and you can just keep going and going. I mean, you can keep walking for miles and miles or running for miles, because you're doing it at such a slow pace that your body can keep up, your muscles can keep up making ATP just by aerobic cellular respiration. And your muscles get used to that, and your muscles become what we call slow twitch fibers, or the technical term for that is slow oxidative. So your muscles get really good at just doing some kind of low exertion uh, activity for a long period of time, like walking um, or slow running. But if you do something like weightlifting, and you're doing a set of lifting really heavy weights, um, and the weights you're lifting are so heavy that you can only do like 6 or 7 reps, and then your muscles are done. You're using so much ATP in such a short amount of time that your muscles can use up all their ATP in just that 20 half a minute or so that you're doing that set of weightlifting, and now they will switch to anaerobic respiration that quickly. And so if you're doing that kind of activity where you're using your very high exertion, using a lot of ATP in a short period of time, then your muscles have to switch to anaerobic respiration to make ATP. Then your muscles adapt to that, and they become what we call fast twitch, or fast glycolytic fibers. And so they get really good at making ATP by anaerobic respiration in a short period of time. And so depending on what kind of activity you do, your muscles will adapt to that. So somebody like me, my leg muscles, and they're good. They're mostly slow twitch. I wouldn't be very good at weightlifting, but it's like a these bodybuilders with big muscle mass. They're not very good at aerobic stuff like long distance running. In fact, all that muscle mass will just slow you down because all that muscle takes oxygen. I mean, I know bodybuilders like that. They look big and buff and strong, but they get out of breath walking around the block because all that muscle mass takes so much oxygen, and it's all fast twitch fibers. That's not used to just normal low exertion activities. In between that is these fast oxidative fibers. So that would be like in between slow twitch and fast twitch. So if you're not a marathon runner or a weightlifter, you'd be in between, or you'd have a combination of. Most of us have a combination. So cardiac muscles, we've already talked about that. The autorhythmic, this means that your heart has its own pacemaker. We'll talk about that when we do the heart chapter. But the contraction is the same thick and thin filaments and the sliding filament theory. And smooth muscle, involuntary, non-striated. We already know about this. We don't need to know a lot more. Okay, it's hypertrophy versus hyperplasia. These are just general terms in biology. Hyperplasia means um, hyperplasia means that a just means growth or increase in size by adding more cells, cell division. Um, but this is not what hyperplasia is not how your muscles get bigger. If you lift weights, your muscles get bigger. It's not because you're adding more muscle cells by hyperplasia, cells dividing. It's because the muscle cells you already have get thicker. You just add more muscle protein, more thick and thin filaments, and they get stronger. And that's called hypertrophy. Um, we gradually naturally lose skeletal muscles as we get older. That's called sarcopenia. Sarco again means muscle. Um, and so as you get older, you have to work harder just to maintain the muscle mass and muscle strength that you have. So, I know I have to exercise more, a lot more than I did 20, 30 years ago to maintain my muscle conditioning. We just naturally get weaker and lose muscle mass otherwise. Okay, oh, okay, let's stop here. And so what should we do about this exam? Skip it? Uh, you don't need to do that exam. Um, uh, the week after that is spring break and we don't have class. So should we postpone it? Postpone the exam? Um, but what's that going to help though? We, if we, okay, so so we have class next week. We'll just, that exam would have to be on the 21st. And that's okay, I don't care. Should we make the exam number 2 on the 21st? Then next week we can finish up talking about muscles and learning the names of the muscles. But you can look at those muscles on your handout, your worksheet. It has a list of, I think there's more than 17. Let's look at that. Yeah, that list on your handout has, I think I gave you the same list that I used for Anatomy 1, and they have to learn a few more muscles, but you don't need to learn all of these. Once you check off the ones that'll tell you need to learn. You need to learn, I'll just go down the list. Masseter, temporalis, pectoralis, latissimus, trapezius deltoid, external abdominal oblique, rectus abdominis, blah, blah, blah. So yes, all of them, all the way down to so the last 7, starting at diaphragm on down, you can cross them out. You don't need to learn them right now. So the first 17 down through tibialis anterior. those are the ones that's your list. So, you know some of these already. You know where the biceps, the triceps, probably. You know where the gluteus maximus is, right? You're sitting on it right now, right? Tibialis anterior. You can probably figure out where that is. If you know where the tibia muscle is, the shin bone, what's anterior in front of that? So that's the muscle in front of the tibia bone. Quadriceps group, that's these big thigh muscles. It's actually four muscles together, so that's why it's called a group. The hamstrings in the back of the upper leg. So quads, strengthen the knee, hamstrings, bend it. We'll go through this list next week more. But for now, I want you guys to learn bones. Study, grab a skull or a skeleton. You can take this. We got real bones hanging, real skeletons hanging there in that cabinet back there. There's most of the skeleton there. Drawers full of bones and real bones in here. There's some hands. There's a forearm and a hand. This is real. Or something else. I'll not do that for a while and but later, this box, I think, but I got a box back in one of those cabinets of a whole skeleton. This assembled, and I'm gonna let you guys assemble it. We'll do that maybe at 12, maybe 20 till 1 or something. We'll do that. Start letting you assemble that out. We got this exploded skull, which is good to help burn the individual bones, but they're separated in different colors. It's easy to see to tell the bones apart. There's this booklet here. It has some names of all the bones. What do you do for a dislocated shoulder? Anybody know how to fix that? Fix a dislocated shoulder? What's the term they use in medicine for putting a dislocated joint back in place? We call that reducing. But reducing a dislocation. And so I used to be an EMT, emergency medical technician, and the way I learned it that there's more than one way, and it's not like I've seen on television these doctor shows where the doctor takes the guy's laying on the ground, moaning, his shoulders dislocated, so the doctor grabs his arm by the hand, and the doctor puts his foot on the guy's chest and jerks it. That's not that. That's stupid. It's just shoulder. If it's dislocated forward, like it normally is, in front of the socket, you can take the arm, put it in a position with the elbow over the belly button, and put the hand back like he's going to throw a ball, and then you slowly rotate that hand across the chest onto the other shoulder, and it should go right back in. And if it does, you'll know it because the relief will be so immediate that the guy will probably kiss you on the lips. It'll feel so good. That's what I've heard. I haven't been kissed that way. Another way that you can do it is lay the patient down on a table like this and hang a 15-pound weight with just tie it on with a rope or something. We just have him hang there like that, and over time the muscles will relax and allow the weight to pull uh, it should go back into the socket. The kneecap can be dislocated too. I saw that one time when I was in my 20s, and um, to keep your EMT um, certification, you have to practice as an EMT so many hours per year or something. So I used to you can make a little money by getting paid to be at sporting events in case somebody gets hurt. And so I like $20 just to be at a softball game or something. It was a soccer game, a women's league, a women's soccer league once, and usually nothing would happen. I wouldn't have to do anything, but this soccer game, um, there were um, three of these players. We all collided together, and they all three went down, and two of them got back up, but the third one stayed sitting there, and she's sitting on the ground, and she had her left leg, it was just out straight, and she wasn't getting up, and so I started running toward her to see what was happening, and from 20 feet away I could see what was wrong. Her kneecap was over sticking out the side of her knee, and I had never seen that. I didn't learn about that in EMT training. I didn't know what to do, and so I was approaching her, and she saw me come. She says, "Don't touch me. This happens all the time." And so this was a tough. Yeah, she just put her hand on that and pushed it back into place, back into the groove where it belongs, and and she wanted to keep playing after that, but I told her, no, you're not playing anymore. But she got up and limped with how she limped off the field. She said that's happened so many times that everything's so loose that it doesn't take much. She gets hit and it just pops over. She has to put it back, and probably sore for a day or two. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys. Help yourself to those stalls in the cabinet or anything you want. Your lab. Taking those sounds back in your vehicle or whatever you want. Anybody not have the bone handout from last week? I probably got more copies if you don't, if you lost yours or don't have it.
Is this label right? Like this?
What's that? Is that a suture?
Yeah, the suture.
Is that, I don't think you need to, is that on the list? The squamous coronal sagittal xanthoid. There's 4 sutures there. So that one you don't need to know that.
Okay.
Frontal bone sphenoid. Yeah, ethmoid.
Not done with this one yet.
Yeah. So far, so far, yeah, that's right. That's
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to see if you can put this skeleton together? Just lay it out, put the head at this end and the feet at this end. The spinal column is all strung together. The hands and feet are hands and feet bones are assembled, but everything else is separate. And these ribs, don't worry about getting them in perfect order. That would be almost impossible. But some of them are so similar. Just roughly study them out. You can
Oh, that's what, that Nick,
Yes. We're finished. Come on.
Oh, yeah. This person really needs to get their wrist checked, that's for sure.
If it's the small one, it's big one.
It should be smaller than that.
Is it one of those? These two are the same.
So there's this round thing on one, that's a radius. That's the form one. And the other one, the other coin that's about the same length is the ulna. So these are ulnas. So those are fibulars. Those are fibulars. And this is, that's a fibula.
Okay.
And so, yeah, remember the tumors have a ball on it that fits into that socket? The other one is, it looks pretty good. You want to go home?
Yes.
Good job. There's another play like this.
exam 2, is that gonna be on March 21st now?
I already changed it on the ICR on you.
Okay, good, because I wrote it down, I just wanted to make sure.
And I'll send an announcement for the rest of the class who didn't show up today.